Let's bring in Loup Ventures Gene Munster. Gene, great to see you. If TikTok went away for whatever reason, a U.S. ban or whatnot, would a lot of tech's problems be solved?
Meta certainly wouldn't. I agree with Dan. This is going to be one hot political topic going in the next presidential race. The drift between China and the U.S. continues, and it is, to me, surprising that TikTok is still allowed in the U.S. Of course, China does not allow Facebook or Meta or Instagram in China for the simple reason they don't want people in the U.S. influencing how Chinese people think. It strikes my attention that why would the U.S. government want China to have that ability? So I think this is not about tracking user data and what some teenager video they're watching. This is about essentially a straight line into kind of the greater thinking around U.S. People on TikTok. And I think it's ultimately going to get banned. And I think it's going to be a big rejoice moment for Meta. If you're going to ask me to put the probability that it gets banned, it's high. I think it's 70, 80%. The timing on it, I think it's 1 or 2 years away.
Hey, Gene, so we know TikTok is the app for everything, certainly for younger folks. But how about Instagram? Because if I'm 12 to 16 or 17 years old, I'm probably getting my news feeds. I'm probably getting, Instagram seemingly actually even ahead of TikTok and then into YouTube. So why is Meta or Facebook not performing here? Talk about this. And again, don't talk. I think we all universally say we don't necessarily love the company. Sometimes you love the stock, sometimes you don't. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I would say that those are my exact thoughts. This is one that I really struggle with. I think that their products, I don't think that they make the world a better place. I think Apple's products make the world a better place. I don't think Meta does. I think that there's been an overreaction in the stock with Meta relative to the competitive threat to TikTok. I just outlined why I think that ultimately that gets banned. But I think what's most important is that the reach that Meta has with all of its properties, basically 40% of the global internet audience uses their products on a daily basis. It's a big audience. And I think that all the issues that they've had and will still work through, I think that ultimately that network is a big deal. One other piece is just one of my, I guess, takeaways from that marathon Joe Rogan podcast from Zuckerberg last week. Zuckerberg's a fighter, and I think that that's one thing just to keep in mind. If you look at big tech, he's one of the few standing founders. So Tim, when I put it together, it is a reluctant company that we own, but we do think that this stock is going to perform relatively well in the weeks and quarters ahead.
Well, let's be clear, Gene. He's standing because he has a special class of stock, which allows him to stand no matter what. But putting that aside, I wanted to get your quick take on Apple and its product launches today.
They just make it look easy, Melissa, and I think that there's probably some narrative around innovation versus incremental updates, and I think that these incremental updates have innovation in it. And as I think about the product, I think that this will ultimately provide upside to the Street's 5% revenue for next year. I think that there's also the biggest takeaway from me today. The features were generally as expected. The satellite thing, I put a 40% chance for that happening. That ultimately came in. But the biggest surprise was in pricing. I had predicted that 2 of the 4 new iPhones would have lower pricing. In fact, they maintained their pricing. And in this environment, maintaining pricing is a price cut. And I think that potential iPhone buyers are going to recognize that and appreciate that from Apple. And it's going to beg a question about can they continue to maintain margins in this pricing environment while maintaining, or this cost environment while maintaining those pricing. And if you're curious, is that if you look at the June quarter of 21 versus 22, the margins were exactly the same, 43%. And that's this underneath the surface. One of the many things that make this an incredible company is their ability to continue to provide value to consumers and still provide value to investors at the same time. And I think that key takeaway gets lost, I think, in people debating features on a day like today.
Gene, thank you. Great to get your take.
Thank you.
Gene Munster, Loup Ventures. Apple sticking to 43% on margin. That's in this environment. That's a feat.
Tremendous. I mean, there's nothing wrong with what they've done.
Yeah.
The stock has been the way. It's been interesting how the stock has traded. Moved from 129 to 174. Carter came on the show with one of those Tuesday nights and basically said sell everything. That was prescient because it traded down to 153 and change today. The question is today's move to the downside and subsequent bounce enough to get you bullish again? I'm not convinced of that but it's certainly interesting. But the beta trade to me, and Dan has been on this, that August 30th capitulation bottom, in my opinion, in Snap on big volume might have been your opportunity to get long that stock and be long it right here.
So a couple of things. So, Guy, you know this as a trader. What always happens with these trades is they upset the most amount of people at any given point. Everyone thinks that after the Apple event, that Apple stock is going to fall off a cliff. I think Apple stock is actually going to rally for all the reasons that you just said, 175 to 155. If it goes back to 165, it's a tremendous victory for the bulls. Meta, down near that pandemic low, 140. This is make or break for Meta. If Meta breaks down, and it's been trying to build a base here, so I agree with Dan, it's done nothing. They don't know who they are, and they're spending a ton of money to try to figure it out. If it breaks here, this thing is lights out.
Dan, what do you think if TikTok were announced tomorrow that it's banned in the United States, how much does that mean for a Meta? How much does that mean for an Alphabet?
Oh, I think it's huge for Meta. I mean, I think it changes the whole narrative about Meta. I think they can actually take their foot off the metaverse sort of pedal. But I also think it's a sort of thing where Snap, and I guess I'm talking my book here, I'm long the stock. I think Snap is up easily 50% on that announcement right there. When you think about that revenue base and you think about how much a leaner company this is now. And I also like the fact, you know, Gene just said that Zuckerberg's a fighter. We all saw the video. We know that he's tough. But let me tell you something, okay? Like, if this company is really willing to put up those sorts of expectations by the end of next year, given the cuts that they just made, I like that. They have nothing to lose here. And I said this, I think, a couple weeks ago. I think your risk is like 2 down, but like 5 or 6 up in the Snap here. So, again, that's the one I want to play.
Yeah, he's probably right. I'll just say this entire conversation is all predicated on what your market view is. And look, Apple is not moving higher if the market's moving lower. And Snap is a long duration asset that's not making money and is a high multiple tech stock that's been getting destroyed. So this is the issue here. And tech, with their outperformance, is why we show relative performance charts of, say, semiconductors to the S&P or the triple Qs to the S&P, because those breakdowns are where we are in the market right now.